Quiz, hot shot. What do George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Duvall, Donald Pleasance, Sid Haig, Ian Wolfe, the violent cult Synanon, and David Ogden Stiers have in common? The answer? Coming up on the next show.
Who was it said that observing the United States is like watching an epic movie? Oscar Wilde?
Woody Allen?
Etc.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Charles Forbin. In a few moments, Colossus will address us directly.
I bring you peace. It may be the peace of plenty and content, or the peace of unburied death. Obey me and live, or disobey and die.
Today I'm going to take you on a journey to several short-lived but awesome science fiction classics. We're going to start with Colossus, the Forbin Project, because this film so accurately sees the future. Of course, computers haven't developed a mind of their own yet, but the rise of artificial intelligence, or AI, sees us a little closer to the possibility presented in this film. It's a 1970 American science fiction thriller film from Universal Pictures, produced by Stanley Chase, directed by Joseph Sargent, that stars Eric Braeden, Susan Clark, Gordon Pinsent, and William Shallard. It's based upon the 1966 science fiction novel Colossus by Dennis Feltham Jones. The film is about an advanced American defense system named Colossus becoming sentient. After being handed full control, Colossus' draconian logic expands on its original nuclear defense directives to assume total control of the world and end all warfare for the good of humankind, despite its creator's orders to stop. Forbin is the designer of an incredibly sophisticated computer that will run all of America's nuclear defenses. Shortly after being turned on, it detects the existence of Guardian, which is the Soviet counterpart to Forbin. Previously unknown to U.S. planners, both computers insist that they be linked, and after taking safeguards to preserve confidential material, each side agrees to allow it. As soon as the link is established, the two become a new supercomputer and threaten the world with the immediate launch of nuclear weapons. If they are detached, Colossus begins to give its plans for the management of the world under its guidance. Forbin and the other scientists form a technical resistance to Colossus, which must operate underground. The film was originally to star Charlton Heston or Gregory Peck. Heston would have been good for that role because he became the name of science fiction in the early 70s, having reprised his role of Taylor in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the film which prevented him from doing this role, and it continued with the likes of Omega Man and Soylent Green. The producers wanted an unknown actor in this role. Thus, Eric Braeden would be cast in the lead. When he was cast, Braeden was still using his birth name, Hans Gudegast, and Universal Pictures executive Lou Wasserman told him that no one would be allowed to star in an American film if they had a German name. Thus, Colossus the Forbin Project became the first production in which he started using Eric Braeden as his stage name. Real computers were used, which means the studio had to be climate controlled. The executives at Control Data Corporation found out that Universal was planning a major movie featuring a computer, and they saw their chance for some public exposure. Thus, they agreed to supply free of charge $4.8 million worth of computer equipment and technicians. So unlike a lot of movies and TV at the time, this wasn't just a box full of blinking lights, these were actual computers. The title was changed to the Forbin Project to avoid any confusion with Steve Reeves and his Hercules films. The critical response was mostly positive, with an 87% approval on Rotten Tomatoes. A remake was announced in 2007, but even though it's gone through many hands, nothing tangible has come from this endeavor. D.F. Jones worked with computers in Britain during World War II and knew about Colossus, the computer which was the heart of Britain's code-breaking complex at Bletchley Park. James Cameron was a huge fan of this film, which influenced his screenplay for The Terminator in 1984. He fulfilled his fandom decades later by casting Eric Braeden in the role of John Astor in Titanic. Universal later reused the footage of Colossus being activated as part of Cyborg, the $6 Million Man, before they began operating on Steve Austin to attach his bionic limbs. the entire activation sequence from Colossus is used. Producer Stanley Chase said that while it's frightening to suppose a computer could take over the world, it was indeed possible. His technical advisor said that a machine like Colossus actually existed at that time. The model for Colossus was supposedly the NORAD system that controlled the U.S. national defense systems, and that's why the computer programming center in the film was located in the Rocky Mountains, which just happens to be the home of NORAD. The U.S. government wouldn't allow a film crew on the NORAD grounds, so the exteriors were filmed at the Lawrence Hall of Science in Berkeley, California. The missile sites were photographed in the California desert near Palmdale. A television series with a similar theme, albeit a more humorous vein, was Max Headroom, 20 Minutes into the Future.
What I want to know is, why are the only funny lines on this show the ones behind me?
20 minutes into the future, the world has become imbued networked television. It's illegal to turn off your TV.
Hi. Both of you.
This junk is a machine. This is not Edison Carter. It is a computer-generated geek. It is useless.
20 minutes into the future, the world has become imbued networked television. It's illegal to turn off your TV, and televisions are given to the needy. In this world, Network 23 has a highly rated news program with a roving reporter named Edison Carter. But Carter uncovers a plot to cover up lethal blip bursts and is almost killed in the process. In the process, his mind is copied into a computer, and the computer-generated personality Max Headroom is born. Together, Max and Edison, along with Edison's controller, which is Theora, their boss, Murray, and their boss's boss, Ben Shabiel, and Network 23's boy genius, Bryce, combat crime, placate sponsors, defeat rival networks, and turn in stories. After the show was initially canceled in the second season because it drew minimal ratings after being moved to Friday nights against Dallas and Miami Vice, Max Headroom made a final announcement, paraphrasing and imitating Winston Churchill. We will fight them on the streets of Dallas. We will fight them on the streets of Miami. Vice. And if the ratings book lasts for 1,000 years, they will say this is Max Headroom's finest hour. On the 27th November, 1987, U.S. television station WGN, Channel 9 in Chicago, Illinois, was infamously hijacked by a man wearing a Max Headroom mask. The man managed to hack into the station on 2 occasions during that night. Firstly, during a local news bulletin, during 30 seconds, and 2 hours later, during 90 seconds, during a repeat of a Doctor Who episode, Horror of Fang Rock, Part 1. The man is shown staring into the camera with a menacing grin, and during the second interruption, began addressing the camera, speaking nonsense and surrealist monologue with his voice distorted. He talked about TV host Charles Swirsky, saying he'd better than him and calling him frickin' liberal. He said the famous Coca-Cola slogan, "Catch the wave," but with a Pepsi can in his hands, before throwing to the ground and making the bird partially off screen. To be so close off the camera, with his middle right finger covered by a fake finger, he said, "Your love is fading," referring to the Temptations song, "I Know I'm Losing You." He hummed a TV cartoon, Clutch Cargo, 1959's theme, to say in the middle of the humming, "I still see the X," usually confused as "I stole CBS," referring the title of Cargo's last episode, Big X, 1959. He complained of my piles, usually confused as my files. He claimed he did a masterpiece for the world's greatest newspaper nerds. He put on a left-hand dirty glove, explaining that his brother wore another one, which was a reference to famous Michael Jackson's right-hand glove he wore in the 80s, before being spanked by a girl partially off-screen with a fly swatter. Despite the several attempts, he has never been traced or identified. The answer to the trivia question before we started the show, what did George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Robert Duvall, Donald Pleasance, Sid Haig, Ian Wolfe, the violent cult Synanon, and David Ogden Stiers have in common? The answer? THX 1138. That's a 1971 science fiction film co-written and directed by George Lucas in his directorial debut. Produced by Francis Ford Coppola and co-written by Walter Murch, the film stars Robert Duvall and Donald Pleasence with Don Pedro Coley, Maggie McComey, and Ian Wolfe in supporting roles.
You have asked, are we happy? Are we happy and effective? Consultation with leading experts in the field makes it perfectly clear that we are all now programmed for perfect happiness. Perfect happiness.
Are you all right? What did they do to you?
There are, of course, occasional technical or electronic errors in programming.
The film is set in a dystopian future in which the citizens are controlled by android police and mandatory use of drugs that suppress emotions. THX 1138 was developed from Lucas's 1967 student film Electronic Labyrinth, THX 1138 4EB, which he created while attending the USC School of Cinematic Arts. The feature film was produced by a joint venture between Warner Brothers and American Zoetrope. A novelization by Ben Vogel was published in 1971. The sounds of the police motorcycle are the sped-up sounds of women screaming together in a tiled bathroom. The film received mixed reviews from critics and underperformed at the box office upon its initial release, but it has subsequently received critical acclaim and gained a cult following, particularly in the aftermath of Lucas's success with Star Wars in 1977. A director's cut prepared by Lucas was released in 2004. In the dystopian future, sexual intercourse and reproduction are prohibited, and mind-altering drugs are mandatory to enforce compliance among the citizens and to ensure their ability to conduct dangerous and demanding tasks. Workers wear identical white uniforms and have shaven heads to emphasize uniformity. Likewise, with police androids who wear black and monks who wear robe. Instead of names, people have designations with their arbitrary letters, referred to as the prefix, and 4 digits shown on an identity badge worn at all times. The script required almost the entire cast to shave their heads, either completely bald or with buzz cuts. As a publicity stunt, several actors were filmed having their first haircuts and shaves at unusual venues, with the results used in a promotional feature titled Bald, The Making of THX 1138. Many of the extras were recruited from the nearby Sananan cult, an addiction recovery program that later became a violent cult. George Lucas apparently named the film after his San Francisco telephone number, 849-1138. The letters THX correspond to letters found on the buttons 8, 4, and 9.
What's wrong?
Nothing really. I just feel that I need something stronger.
If you have a problem, don't hesitate to ask for assistance.
Some of Sen's dialogue is taken from speeches by Richard Nixon. Terrence McGovern looped in the line, "I think I just ran over a Wookiee back there on the expressway." He coined the phrase for a friend of his named Bill Wookiee, who accompanied him on the way to the recording session. Thinking up an excuse for being late, he used his friend's last name. It would later inspire director Lucas to use the name for the species of Chewbacca in Star Wars. This film predicated separate television channels for violence, sex, comedy, and news. When the film was made in 1971, there was no dedicated channels for types of entertainment. Executives at Warner Brothers did not like the finished film. They cut the film and reduced the marketing budget. In the final shot of THX having escaped to the outside, it's Matthew Robbins wearing a ball cap and not Robert Duvall.
I can offer you a miracle that will let you thumb your nose at the Undertaker for the next 10 years. Of course, if you're not interested.
One word from me and she buys it.
One word from you, and you're dead.
You won't shoot me.
Try me.
Now here's our final look at obscure but awesome science fiction series, the 1970 The Immortal. There have been other series called The Immortal, but this is about the Christopher George Show. The Immortal is an American television series starring Christopher George as a man whose blood chemistry and resistance to almost all diseases, including old age, makes him both almost immortal and a target of several wealthy men who would basically use him as a personal blood bank. It aired on ABC from September 24th, 1970 to January 14, 1971. The series is based on a pilot film of the same name which aired on September 30th, 1969 as an ABC Movie of the Week. The pilot is based on the 1964 science fiction novel The Immortal by James Gunn. Ben Richards is a test car driver for a large corporation owned by billionaire Jordan Braddock. He's 43 years old but looks young enough to pass for 30, and he has never been sick a day in his life. Ben's life changes when he donates a pint of blood. Braddock, who is dying, is given a blood transfusion of his donated blood and is brought back from the brink of death. Ben's physician, Dr. Matthew Pierce, determines that his O-negative blood contains all known antibodies and immunities. This gives Ben immunity to every known disease and an estimated lifespan 5 to 10 times that of other human beings. That makes him, in the doctor's words, virtually immortal. The billionaire decides that he is to control Richard's life so he can access his life-saving blood. The plotline of The Immortal is quite different from that of the book on which it's based. The protagonist of the book was a vagrant, not a test driver, who discovered his immortality when he sells his blood. Instead, The Immortal bears more than a superficial resemblance to the then-recent very popular TV series The Fugitive, which still aired in syndicated reruns. That series had ended its 4-season run 3 years before The Immortal began. It's also the mirror of the series Run for Your Life, about a man suffering from a terminal disease who wants to experience everything because he is going to die soon. While Richards has to run because he will live virtually forever. The Immortal was canceled before a proper finale episode could be filmed. You notice in the TV movie The Night Stalker, when the refrigerator containing blood is opened, there's blood labeled Benjamin Richards. That's obviously a leftover prop. In a bit of irony, series star Christopher George, whose character had a medical genetic condition that made him immortal, died of a heart attack, aged only 52, barely a decade after the series ended. His life was theoretically cut short due to damage to his organ from a Jeep rollover accident while he was filming The Rat Patrol a few years before this series. And that was our show for today. What do you think? Were you a fan of some obscure, lesser-known science fiction films and television series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And while you're at it, I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel, click the little bell to stay informed. Also, check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise down in the comments below. Until next time, this is Kevin Given saying, live long and prosper, may the Force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.